Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me for session 2 of our Back to the Future of Work Again series. For those of you who haven't seen session 1, my name's Jayne Dunn and I'm the Managing Director of Guardian Business Services. In session 1, we looked at the first segment of the employment life cycle, which is defining or redefining how you do HR. And we really just went back to look at some basics on where to start thinking about how people management will look like for you in your business going forward after lockdown and people start to fully return back to work. In session 2, we're going to be looking at performing and managing, and they are segments 2 and 3 of the employment life cycle. And the focus of today is really trying to get you to think about what your performance standards are going forward to try and help you get through the post-pandemic recovery, and also starting to manage perhaps some thorny HR issues that maybe you've put on the back burner for too long, or perhaps new issues that have arisen as a result of the pandemic. So before we get into all of that, I'll just tell you a little bit about what we've got in store. So I will just go into a bit of a brief recap on the defining session, and then we'll move on to improving performance. And that means looking at both company performance and the performance of your individual people. We'll also look at how to conduct a performance improvement process and how to get your people to the standard that they need to be. We'll then move on to the managing section, and that will be split into 2 parts. The first part is looking at COVID specific related HR issues, and the second one is dealing with general day-to-day HR issues that unfortunately we all have to face from time to time. And then I'll just give you a little overview of the next session. Okay, so we have a workable plan up for grabs, and it's a new product that we're launching very soon to help people managers and business owners to get their people strategy in place. We'll work with you to get that done, but it was also give you some clarity on what you do actually need to do, keep you motivated and keep you on track. It's always easy to have your to-do list and put it to one side, so we'll make sure that you keep motivated. And whilst we're doing that, we'll also help you develop your confidence on sorting out your shizzle. It's an excellent package and it's actually worth £1,000. So what we're saying to people is, if you engage in our Facebook group, Back to the Future of Work Facebook group, and you pose your comments and you get involved, then the person that we feel has been most involved and the most engaged will have the opportunity to win a workable plan. So it's definitely worth making the effort, I think. Okay, so just a bit of a recap on session 1. As I said, it was all about the defining section of the employment life cycle. But what we wanted to do first of all was just look at some lessons learned that we had from the pandemic. It's not all been doom and gloom, although it's probably felt like it most of the time. But we looked at things such as, making sure that you keep on top of your health and safety obligations going forward. The pandemic brought to the forefront at how important that is, and people are very much aware of their health and safety rights and entitlements. So that's something that we need to maintain going forward. We also looked at, having your continuity plan in place. None of us could have seen this coming, and those businesses who did perhaps have a business continuity plan in place probably fared a lot better than some of us who didn't. So hopefully you've got one now, and if, gosh forbid, any other pandemic struck or any other catastrophe, you'd be able to handle it a lot better. And another one that I'd just like to point out is employee engagement. How do we take our staff with us? It's been a really tricky time for everyone. And, a lot of people think people sat at home on furlough or working from home have had it easy. They certainly haven't. And we need to, when we're all getting back into the workplace together, we need to make sure that we do engage them, we do motivate them. And we looked at a couple of ways of being able to do that. One thing I did talk about was an employment engagement survey, and we can actually help you do that. We have a good partnership with the Engagement Multiplier, and if you want to go and have a little look at that, you can see them on our website under our partnerships. So it's well worth a look, and definitely something to think about if you want to sort of find out a bit more about where your people are at the moment. And we also looked at getting back on track. How do we do that? So we need to look at our business plan. Is it still fit for purpose? Can we still use the same business plan that we had 12 months ago? Does it need to be reviewed, revised? Do we need to tear it up and look at it again completely afresh? You can't do anything without having your business plan in place. So that has to be the first step. It doesn't need to be all singing or dancing. It could just be a sheet of A4, but it's just laying the groundwork for where you want the business to be and what objectives you have set for the business and your people. Following on from that, we then can form the people strategy. How are your people going to help you deliver the business plan? And that could involve lots of different initiatives. It could be, unfortunately, having to look at downsizing and reducing your headcount. It could be looking at recruiting. If you've been successful throughout the pandemic because certain opportunities have arisen for you, or perhaps you're moving into a new product development area or a new service delivery, you could be looking to recruit people. You might want to start looking at training and developing your people in new things, different areas, or just giving them some refresher training to help them get back on track after being out of the workplace for so long. So everyone's people strategy will be different from each other's. It can vary widely, but again, that's something that we can help you with if you're really struggling to pull that together. And it's important to take our people with us. Everybody hates change. Well, most people hate change, and it's just been the year to beat all years, and people will struggle coming back into work. Even those who've continued to work throughout the pandemic will be finding it hard. They'll be tired. They might be resentful of those who have been sat at home doing nothing, even though that's stressful for people as well. So we really just need to make sure that we're communicating with our people, preferably before everybody gets back to work fully, that we are finding out how they're feeling. And again, that's where the engagement survey can come into play. And also just involving them, talking to them as adults, letting you know if you're having to think about making changes. The sooner you involve people, the better. And although it might not necessarily always be good news, they'll certainly appreciate and respect you a lot more for being open and honest with them. Okay, so that's just a very basic recap of session 1. So now we're going to move into the performing segment of the employment life cycle. And it could be that after session 1, you've sat there and you've made a great big list of your business objectives, your business plan, and your people strategy. And you're just thinking, I don't even know where to start. This is so overwhelming. And it's easy to just bury your head in the sand again and just think, oh, it'll work itself out. It always does. And things will just tick along nicely. But I think, after this pandemic, nothing needs to be left to chance. So what we can do to start is just put everything into perspective. As I said in session 1, there have been some positives that have come out of this pandemic. And what we need to do is, rather than just focus on the negatives and what hasn't worked and what we haven't achieved, list the positives. There must be some. Even if it's just, people have worked from home, we've managed to stay in good communication with them, we've managed to keep them motivated. It could be that actually we've managed to find some new opportunities as a result of the pandemic. So it's really starting to list those positives as well. What can we do more of? What's worked really well, rather than just looking at oh gosh, we aren't where we should have been a year ago. So when you're looking at your list of things that you need to do, it is overwhelming. I absolutely get that. But remember, that's the bigger picture. So what we need to start doing is breaking it down into short-term, mid-term and long-term view. So you can start to look at, what is a priority? What do I need to fix immediately? And for example, that could be communicating with staff. Perhaps we haven't been as good at keeping in touch and reaching out to them to find out how they're doing. So what we can actually do is put some measures in place to start that now, even before we go back to the workplace. Start communicating with your staff, whether it's via email, whether it's by the line manager, giving them a quick call, or arranging a team Zoom session, because then when they do eventually go back to the workplace, it won't be such a shock. They'll feel that they've already had some contact and communication from you. Looking at that, the priorities, you can look at quick wins. What can we put into place that will be really effective, we can put into place efficiently and quickly, that will really start to win people over? And again, it could be, talk to your staff. What do they want when they return to work? What would they like to see? And again, just get them involved. You also need to think about your sphere of influence and control. So let's remember that as much as we think we can, we can't control everything. There will be things that are way beyond our control. For example, the pandemic, the coronavirus. There was nothing we could do to stop that from happening, and there's nothing we can do to stop it from happening again, apart from trying to influence it in terms of doing the right thing, following the measures that are in place in terms of social distancing and PPE. But don't dwell on the things that you can't change. You need to step away and think, okay, that's out of my hands. What can I work on? What can I have a positive influence on? And that will really help drive you forward. Okay. And again, we've got this great big long list of things to do. We can't do it all tonight. We can't do it all tomorrow. We can't even do it all next week or next month. You can't fix it all at once. So what we recommend is focus on the next 90 days. So that's the next 3 months coming up. And even then break that down into 30 days, a 30-day cycle and a monthly cycle. So set your objectives for month 1, month 2 and month 3, and just work towards getting those done. And then it's the same as putting everything into perspective. Take each one at a time, work on what you need to, and do it well, and then that will give you a boost to move on to what comes next. Okay, so things can only get better. I hope that's true for the vast majority of us. And what we need to do here is look at our organisation. Are we a well-oiled machine? Lots of businesses who perhaps were better prepared, had processes, systems in place before the pandemic hit, have probably come out of this a lot better than those who maybe didn't have any sort of precautions in place. It could be that an organisation that was struggling before has actually had new opportunities made available to them, and they've come out of this so well. There will be organisations, sadly, who would see themselves as a squeaky wheel. So what is it that we need to fix? We need to be honest with ourselves here and just think about, where aren't we performing? So again, it's about looking at the business plan and where do we need to be. It's also about looking at your performance versus budget. So obviously financials are extremely important in the business world, but it's not the be all and end all. So if you are spending every night worrying about your finances, that's not going to be any good for you. It's no good for the business, and it's no good for your team. They're looking to you to guide them through this. So whilst it is very important, you need to really put your energies into getting your to-do list done and driving the business forward, and just take comfort from the fact that you're aware of the finances and what needs to be done to help get through this tricky period. And also just knowing when you might need to get help or take action, but don't let it consume you, otherwise it will just drive you under. Okay, and then we're looking at how can we do this better. So it's all about improving our performance. It's all about making things better for the future. And I'd say a big part of that is, assessing what your customers want. What are they looking for now that business is hopefully going to get back to normal? And also, what do your staff want? How can they help improve the business? And they are the forefront of your business. They're the people at the coalface. And it could be that they actually already know how things can be improved, how our company performance can be improved. So again, just talking about employee engagement, it's a good idea to speak to your staff, ask them, have you got any ideas, what we can bring in that will actually really help the performance of the business and even their own performance as well. And you'll find that a lot of them will really engage in that, and they'll probably come up with some ideas that you would never have thought of. So I think that's really important, is to involve your staff. Okay, so we'll now look at sort of performance on an individual level, and it could be that before coronavirus hit, you had a person or a number of people who weren't doing what they needed to do, they weren't pulling their weight, or they just weren't reaching the standards that were required. It could be that perhaps they weren't serving the business as much as you would like them to, they weren't perhaps showing the values and sort of being part of the team. And I would say to you, if that's the case, don't put it off any longer. We're going to be looking at improving the performance of the business. We need to look at the contribution of our individuals as well. What you need to really establish first of all, though, is what's the real reason why they're, in your radar? Is it because of capability or is it conduct? And the way we can distinguish between these two is there's a term that we use called can't do or won't do. Can't do is where somebody, as hard as they might try, just cannot do the job. For whatever reason, they're just not capable of carrying out that role at the moment. If it's a won't do, then that's a conduct issue, and it's where it's more about someone's attitude, in that they can fully well do the job absolutely fine. They just choose not to do it, or they choose not to do it in the way that you want them to. And that's really when we start looking at disciplinary, because it's more about their attitude. Sometimes it's not always black and white, but that's usually quite a good indication of whether we're looking at a performance management issue or a conduct disciplinary issue. So the first thing we always ask, if a client calls us and says, I've got this person, they're not doing what they should be doing, they're really rubbish, I want them gone. Our first response is always, well, have you spoken to them about it? Do they know that you're not impressed with their performance? And you'd be amazed at how many people the response is, well, no. I don't know why. I think it could be, the usual story of nobody likes giving bad news or giving poor feedback or having confrontation with people. But is it really fair that if you're not happy with someone's performance, that they don't know? They might think that they're coming in every day and doing a fantastic job because nobody's told them otherwise. So my first piece of advice is always talk to them, on an informal basis, sit down with them, ask them if they understand the requirements of their job, and explain where gaps might be in terms of how they're currently performing and what actually is the standard that's expected for the particular role. It could be that after an initial informal chat, that the penny drops and actually they start doing what they need to do. It could be that you might agree to give them a bit more training, a bit more support. They might want to shadow someone else who does the same job. But normally, if you have those initial informal conversations, you can really help people to improve and get to where they need to be. I would always say as well, when you're having conversations with people, informally or formally, it's always important to document them. So, HR are always blarting on about take a note of it, but it's really important, because if you need to move into a more formal process in terms of managing performance, you'll need to be able to show that you've had those early conversations and that you have tried to help them. It's also good to have evidence or examples of where their standards are falling short. So, for example, if it's paperwork that they're not completing properly, then you could obviously keep copies of those and go through them with the employee to show them where perhaps they're not doing as well as they could be. So just record, document everything. It doesn't need to be war and peace, but we need to just be able to show that we've tried to help this individual to get better. It could be, whilst we're thinking about this person, that we start to think about the team that they're in and their particular line manager, which might be you. It could be that their leader or line manager has lost interest in what they're doing. They have no passion for the business anymore. They're perhaps, up to their ears in work and can't cope with what's being thrown at them. And that will really have an impact on your team. They look to you for guidance on how they're doing. And if you're feeling negative, that will certainly show through, and that could have an impact on their performance. It could be the particular team that they work in. There's some individuals who are negative, are toxic, who don't help out, who make life difficult. And again, that's something that can really have an impact on people. It could be that, there might be some bullying going on, or it could be, that they just don't fit in that team. So it's all these things that we need to sort of preempt. And if you think that might be the case, then again, you need to have a conversation with that person. Okay, so once you've identified that, yes, actually, we do have a performance issue here. It's not just me picking on them because of something that they've done before, that they're just not capable of doing the job. We then need to think, what we're going to do about it. As a line manager, for you to continue walking past this would just be a crying shame. If that person doesn't know they're performing, we really need to help them get better. It's our responsibility as people managers to help them get better. So if you have had your informal conversations with people and it's just not worked, we can then start to look at a more formal process. And this is, when I said in the introduction, this is the performance improvement process. And the reason we follow this process is to make sure that it's fair. So what we do is we start to look at setting some reasonable SMART objectives. I think we all know what SMART means. It's specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, realistic and time bound. And that means sitting down with the employee and looking at where the gaps are in their performance. So for example, as I said before, it could be poor completion of paperwork. So that would be one of the objectives. It should be measurable. We can look at seeing how they start to complete paperwork afterwards. It's specific, should be achievable if it's part of the role. It's realistic, and we might agree to give them a period of time to allow them to improve in that particular objective. We should always have a reasonable timescale for improvement as part of our performance improvement plan, and that will vary. So if you have a member of staff who's worked with you for a number of years, then you would expect to give them a bit longer. So just to give you an example, we have a client who has come to us on a couple of occasions about 2 different people, and they've said, we have this individual who's just rubbish at their job, we want them gone. And you say to them, okay, have you spoken to them about it? Maybe yes or maybe no. You then move on to, well, how long have they worked for you? And in one particular instance, this guy had worked for them for 25 plus years. They'd never had a conversation with him about his performance. He came into work every day thinking he was doing a good job. Nobody ever told him otherwise. And yet they wanted to dismiss him without trying to introduce any sort of improvement measures and trying to support him after 25 years of service. So for someone like that, we would say, you're looking at least 3 months initially to start going through a performance improvement plan. You'd obviously look at, what support you can give him, what extra help and training. If at the end of those 3 months, he's still not there, I would suggest that you'd be looking at it, extending it for another 3 to 6 months. So it's not an overnight process for someone in that situation. And it also depends on the particular job that they do. If it's more complex and it might take them a little bit longer to get up to speed after they've had some extra training, then you might want to consider giving them a bit longer as well. Okay. As part of the performance improvement plan, you must have regular reviews. It's not a case of just sitting down with the employee, agreeing the objectives with them and then leaving them to flounder. It's important that you have regular meetings with them to see how they're getting on, to assess their progress, and to see if there's anything else that we need to do to help them. I would suggest, if we're looking at a timescale of a month, 2 months to review their performance, you should be meeting them at least every 2 weeks, if not more often. And remember to record your conversations as well. It's got to be two-way communication. So it's not just a case of you as the line manager telling them what they need to do, dictating to them the steps that they need to take. It's important that you actually get their involvement. Ask them how they think we can help them improve. Ask them if the training that we're giving them is effective. It could be that, we just haven't given them the right kind of training for them and there are different ways of doing it. If you involve the employee in that process, they will certainly engage a lot more and will feel like they have a bit of ownership over it as well. And it's not just something that's being done to them. Okay, evidence-based support. So this is sort of going back to, having the ability to go back to documents that we might have or evidence that we might have that they're still not performing, they're not where they need to be, to help them understand, still where the shortcomings are. And again, it just means if unfortunately in the future we have to move through the performance improvement process and ultimately let someone go, we can show that we've tried everything we possibly can to help them improve. And it also needs to be objective. So if you feel as the line manager that perhaps you have an issue with this individual, perhaps because you're fed up with them and they frustrate you, or maybe they've said or done something that's annoyed you in the past, you need to step back and have a think about that. And if you feel that you're perhaps not the best person to manage this process because you don't think that you can be objective, talk to one of your peers, talk to another line manager or HR, just to get a sense check on whether you can be objective or not, and also whether it might be worth someone else picking up this process, just to make sure that it is fully objective. Okay, so as I said, it's not an overnight fix in terms of managing someone's performance, and we really should, out of respect for them, give them a full opportunity to try and improve before we decide to even, take action or discipline them or move to a dismissal. However, there are situations where we can potentially avoid going through that long drawn out process, even though we do still have to exercise caution in some places. But if we have someone who's still currently within their probationary period, we certainly wouldn't suggest that you start going down a whole complex, drawn out, lengthy performance improvement plan. We would still say that you should speak to them, even though it would be easy to say, it's not working out, off you go, goodbye and God bless. We should still have that conversation with them in the first place to say, look, I don't know if if you fully understand the requirements of the job. This is what it looks like. What extra training have we given you? Any training? Is it good enough? But then if it's still not working out and it's clear that they just don't fit into the role or the business, then yeah, absolutely. As long as you follow your contract with the notice periods, then it would be okay to let them go. Fixed term contracts are due to expire. Yeah, absolutely. You wouldn't need to start going down some long drawn out process. But just remember that the non-renewal of a fixed term contract is a dismissal. So you just need to exercise caution, particularly if they've been with you for quite a long time. And again, just make sure that you are following any notice periods in terms of the contract. You might have subcontractors working for you who shouldn't be classed as employees, but it might just be worth checking again the contract that you have in place with them to make sure they haven't got any employment rights, and making sure that you follow any rules and procedures in there in terms of how you part company. But again, with everybody, if it's not working and they're not doing something that they should be doing, talk to them. It could be fixable. It could be that they've completely misunderstood the brief and, just need to be pointed in the right direction. We have situations where we have people with less than 2 years service. Everybody does seem to think that that's a magic formula, that, oh, great, they've got less than 2 years service, we can just let them go. Again, you can, in terms of them not being able to claim ordinary unfair dismissal, but there are other claims that they could make at a tribunal. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail. But again, have a conversation with them. Talk to them about what they might be struggling with, how we can help them. And if it's not working out, then absolutely follow the notice periods in your contract, but just watch out for these warnings that I'll give you shortly. And then, of course, you might have some temporary labour. It could be 0 hours or casual workers, or it could be agency workers. So if that's not working out, with 0 hours, just don't give them any more hours if you don't want them working in your business. Or if it's an agency worker, go back to the agency and give them feedback and see if improvements can be made. And if not, then maybe they can send you someone else. But don't be frightened to do that, because it's really good for the agency to know and get that feedback about the individuals that they're sending out to companies. Okay, so I did say there are some watch outs, specifically with less than 2 years service. We all think wonderful, we can just sack them and off they go. However, we just need to be careful that there's no potential claim they might have for discrimination as a result of protected characteristics. They're all listed on the screen there, but we've obviously got discrimination based on sex, pregnancy and maternity, gender reassignment, age, disability. So lots of different areas where protection is afforded to people. So it's just really important that, you know, you are clear in your mind that the reason you want to dismiss this individual is because of poor performance or a disciplinary situation. We can evidence that. We've gone through a process. We've had discussions with them, and that actually, you know, there is no sort of hint of discrimination coming from us at all. It's just really important that we're very aware of that. Also, whistleblowing and things like that, health and safety, if people have raised those as issues, you've got to be clear that they haven't been dismissed for those reasons. Also looking at fixed term or part-time status, they do have protection in terms of discrimination. So, for example, if you were looking to reduce headcount, it wouldn't be sensible just to dismiss all of those part-time workers, because they would have a potential claim for discrimination. And, you know, there's no ceiling on the level of compensation for discrimination. So it's, you know, it could be a scary thing entering into a claim and going to tribunal. But also, we have to remember that people don't actually even need to be an employee to try and claim discrimination, because as soon as you put an advert out there, or you start talking to someone about, you know, possibly appointing them, they have rights. So if you choose the wrong wording in an ad, if you interview in a certain way, you know, you could be facing a potential claim there. So they don't even need, you don't even need to have spoken to them. If they've seen a job ad that they find offensive, that could even lead to a claim. Okay, so I referred quite a bit there to referring back to contracts with the various relationships that you have with people. And again, because we're kind, generous people, as I said in session 1, we're happy to share our free guide to contracts. It's been prepared by our lawyers in Guardian Law, and it's just full of sort of practical advice and guidance on, you know, what you need to be looking at when you're drawing up a contract for your workers. We will share the link in the Facebook group, the Back to the Future of Work group, for you to be able to access that. So please feel free to download it. Okay, so we're now moving into the managing stage in terms of sort of HR issues related to COVID. And furlough, as I said in session 1, furlough has been extended to the end of September, so that's still very much a live issue. It could be that you are starting to slowly get people back into work, either fully or by using flexible furlough, but that you're facing reluctance from certain individuals that don't want to come back. Now, a lot of cynical people may well think it's just because they've had X number of months off, you know, sitting at home watching This Morning or Loose Women, and just don't want to come back to work. It's been a cushy number, you know, being at home and receiving 80% of their pay, or even 100% if you've topped up. That may be the case with some people. But with others, there may well be other reasons. And that's why, you know, going back to communication with your staff, having those open and honest conversations, find out why. Why are they not wanting to come back to work? It could be that they're extremely anxious. You know, they haven't been in the workplace. They haven't seen the measures that have been put into place. So they're really nervous. And again, it could just be that they've been off work for so long. You know, they're out of practice of coming in, doing their job. They might be worried about, you know, have they forgotten everything? Particularly if they were quite new to the business when they first started. So, you know, just find out why and have that open conversation. If it's because they're nervous about, you know, coming into work and potentially catching COVID, it's important that you go through the health and safety measures with them. So if you have a risk assessment, a written risk assessment that you can share with them, you know, you could send over a copy and talk them through it over the phone or you know, by Zoom. Let them know, you know, what PPE is in place, what we're doing to make sure that people stay separate. Some of our clients actually have done a really good thing where they've videoed, it was in a factory, and they've actually videoed the shop floor and gone round and showed all the signage that's in place, all the markers where people can't cross, you know, how they're managing communal areas to make sure that not too many people are in there. And that seems to have gone down quite well. So you can be quite creative in how you share that information. If it's the case that they're still not wanting to come back to work after you've gone through all of that, put the ball back in their court and ask them what would make them feel safe to come back. Is there anything in particular that's worrying them that we can resolve quite easily, quite quickly? And just get them, again, it's involving them, and just get them to communicate what might help them to feel safe in coming back to work. If the issue isn't surmountable and they just really don't feel like coming back to work, it could be that maybe they go and get a fit note for anxiety and stress, in which case they would just go on to sick pay. As furlough is still available, you might want to consider keeping them on furlough if that's justifiable, in that that there's not enough work for everyone. So there are some people we can still keep on furlough, but it's not really within the purpose of the scheme to just keep someone on furlough just because they don't want to come back to work. So you need to think about that carefully. Is there other leave possible that we can make available to them? So it could be that they're a working parent. Could we look at maybe allowing them some time off for dependents or for parental leave? Have they got holidays that can be used up, and we can pay them for those for a period of time? And as I said, if maybe they have been to the doctor and have just been signed off with anxiety or stress or any other illness, then it would just automatically be sickness. So those are other ways that we can deal with that. So if we look more into the holiday situation, holidays do continue to accrue throughout furlough. So it could be that you have a number of people who have lots and lots of holidays that they haven't taken and have built up. And you may starting to be panicking about that, on how are we going to manage it? What am I going to do with all these holidays? I just can't accommodate them when people come back. But it's important that we're fair and reasonable. These are holidays that people have accrued, so we need to find some way of working through that with them. You can actually impose holidays. So if you have people who are still on furlough and might be for some time, you might want to think about requesting them to take some of their holidays. That's absolutely fine, but what we need to remember is that we need to give twice as much notice as the length of the holiday. So for example, if we're asking people to take 1 week's notice, we need to give them at least 2 weeks notice, and would always recommend that you put that in writing to them. Another way of managing excess holidays when people come back is allowing them to carry some forward. And there was actually a change in the law last year where we can allow people to carry leave into the next 2 years. I would just say, keep a close eye on that, keep accurate records on how many holidays people have left. Otherwise it will just become a nightmare into the future. And again, talk to staff, talk to them about what you're proposing to do, make it clear to them that, actually we can't allow you to take all of these holidays this year, especially when we first get back into work. It's just not going to be possible. So we're therefore going to allow you to carry 5 days over 1 year and then 5 days into the next, just so that they're clear on what's going to happen as well. When you do take holidays during furlough, or we ask people to take holidays, we have to top it up to 100% of their pay. So if they are only receiving 80% normally when they're not working, during those periods of holidays, we do need to top it up to the full pay. And then if we're looking at bank holidays, if you have people who don't normally work bank holidays and would therefore take it as a holiday, you can continue to honour that and make sure that every bank holiday that comes up while they're on furlough, you just top up their pay to 100%. And I think that's probably quite a timely reminder because we have quite a few bank holidays coming up over the next couple of months, don't we? So just remember that if people do normally take bank holidays and they don't work them, then top them up to 100%. And it could just be worth reminding them in advance that that's what we're going to be doing. If you decide not to top up their pay and make them take it as a holiday, just remember to keep a record that that's an extra day's leave that they need to take in the future. Okay. So still on the holiday situation, but sort of more looking at when people start taking holidays. At the minute, we still can't travel overseas for holidays, so it's kind of easy for us at the minute, but there will come a time, hopefully in the next few months, where we will be allowed to travel overseas. And we need to start thinking about how we're going to manage that. So last year we had the situations where people went on holiday, and overnight whilst they were there, we announced that actually when they come back, because that particular country is on red alert, that they needed to quarantine or self-isolate for 14 days. So that may well happen again. We're not out of this pandemic yet, and we're seeing certain countries now experiencing spikes in cases. So as and when people do start to travel again, just be mindful that there may well be a need for them to self-isolate when they come back. So how are we going to manage that? So last year a lot of people got round it because their employees could work from home, and actually had been anyway, so it was no big deal. They could just carry on and not have to worry about anything. But for those people who haven't been working from home, then can they work from home? Can we make it work? If not, for example, if they work in retail or on the shop floor in a factory, how are we going to manage that? So are we going to agree that they can extend their holidays by an extra 2 weeks, for which they'll get paid holiday pay? If they don't have enough holidays to do that, then would we allow them authorised absence, which would be unpaid? If you take the stance that actually, people when they're going on holiday need to be aware that they may well be requested to quarantine when they get back, you could make it clear that actually, no, we can't accommodate that, and if you choose to go on holiday, then you're going against a reasonable instruction, and we may well start going down the disciplinary road. It will vary from place to place whether you've got enough resources to cover people being off for such an extended period of time. But just think carefully before you start putting your rules in place, because people will be desperate for a holiday this year, and I'm sure if they can take the opportunity, they will. So again, just talk to people. How are we going to manage this? How are we going to get around this? And just see what you can do to sort of avoid having those difficult conversations when people actually come back and it's too late. Okay, so still with COVID, we're looking at sickness and isolation. So as we all know now, I'm sure, that if you are a confirmed case, you have a positive test for coronavirus, or you're showing symptoms, then you are required to self-isolate. It's now gone down to 10 days. It was 14, but they've reduced it to 10. Equally, if you live with someone who's had a positive test, then you have to self-isolate, so that means not coming into work. We can also find out that we need to isolate through the NHS track and trace system. So if one of your employees receives that text, and they're told to stay at home, then they have to. It could be that you decide to work with staff to look at payments, whether they'll just get SSP, because I know that a lot of people, if they're told they have to self-isolate, they just can't afford to do that. So the risk is that they will continue coming into work even knowing that they've had a positive test, which none of us want that to happen. So again, just have conversations about how it can be managed. Can they make up some hours when they come back? Can they do different things to sort of mitigate the loss of pay that they might have whilst they're off self-isolating? If they are told to self-isolate, then they can obtain an isolation note from NHS website and 111 website. They don't need to do that for the first 7 days because they can self-certify, but then after that you can ask them to provide you with one of those isolation notes. And of course, if they're off for any other reason, they can still hopefully obtain a fit note from their GP, even though it might not be as easy as it has been in the past. Okay, so when we have people who are having to isolate because they might have coronavirus, or because they live with someone who does, we can actually look at paying SSP, and that is from the first day of the COVID-related absence. So in normal cases, people are only eligible for SSP from day 4 onwards. They have a 3-day waiting period, but with COVID-related issues, it's from day 1. And also another change that was made was for any COVID-related sickness absences, the employer can actually recover the first 14 days of SSP. After that, it's then down to us. But in most cases, hopefully, if people are only having to quarantine for 10 days, we don't get to that stage anyway. It's also important to check contractual sick pay entitlements. So if you're an employer who tops up SSP to full pay for a period of time, just check your contract and your policy to check whether that is actually contractual or if it's discretionary, and whether you have to pay it in these situations. And just look at what you've done in previous cases as well with other people. We have to treat people fairly and the same. So you can't decide to top up someone's sick pay and not someone else's if they're off for the same reason. So just be aware of that. And also we need to be aware that people may need to isolate more than once. Unfortunately, the coronavirus can hit more than once, and we shouldn't judge people for having to need to take more time off if they've got symptoms again, or maybe they've had symptoms and then someone in their household has had symptoms. It's just the way it is, and unfortunately we just need to grit our teeth and bear it. Okay, so another reason for absence from work due to COVID is that we may have people who are shielding, who have been advised by the government that they need to stay away from work for their own welfare. And they are classed as clinically extremely vulnerable. And I know of people who received that guidance. And they were last told they needed to shield until the 31st of March. But actually breaking news came in just recently that from the 1st of April onwards, there is no longer a need for them to shield. The advice is that if they can work from home, same as all of us, then they should continue to work from home. If they can't work from home, then they can come into the workplace. So if you do have any staff who are currently shielding, if you haven't heard from them, it may well be worth just getting in touch to have a conversation about a potential return to work. If they can work from home, great, put those steps in place. If they can't work from home, talk to them about what extra measures you might want to take to protect them in the workplace, and just have that initial conversation. If somebody lives with someone else who is shielding, there was a bit of confusion about this, I think, initially, that they thought they had to shield as well, but actually that's not the case. So anyone who is living with a clinically extremely vulnerable person, they just need to socially distance. So they can continue to come into the workplace, but just making sure that they're following all the measures and precautions that we've put into place as the employer. Okay. We've also had lots of issues with childcare where, perhaps children have been sent home from school because one of their classmates has tested positive. So they've had to come home to self-isolate, or obviously we've just had the recent complete lockdown for most children just after Christmas, where we were all at home, well, most of us anyway. So in those situations, I think most people did actually use the furlough scheme for that, because the government did actually say that that could be done. But in other instances, there is a possibility of allowing people time off for dependents. And that would particularly suit where perhaps, in the coming months where we're back to school, but we're getting more cases of positive coronavirus, then some children will still be sent home. So you can allow them to have emergency time off for dependents, or you may also agree to let them have parental leave without having to give you the normal notice periods to do that. Both of those are unpaid unless you decide to do something different. Again, if somebody can work from home, then let them, if it's possible, and especially if they've been doing it over the last few months and they've only just recently started to come back into the workplace, it may well be reasonable to let them just work from home for the time that they need to. If none of those are workable, then people can take paid holidays. If, again, they've accrued quite a lot over the last few months, you can get them to use some of those to get them down, or you could just agree to be flexible and allow them some authorised unpaid time off just for the period that they need to get through this tricky situation. Okay, so in defining in session one, we talked about the importance of health and safety and how we need to maintain that going forward. We're not through this pandemic yet, and I think especially as you start to bring more people back into the workplace, it's going to be even more important to monitor those measures and making sure that people are following them. So if you have a risk assessment, make sure you share that with your teams. And in that risk assessment, you should be taking into particular account the location of where people are working, what their particular role is. If you have a pregnant employee, you really need to be looking at protecting them as much as you can and putting maybe extra measures in place. And of course, people with disabilities as well, making sure that we've got everything in place for them. Speak to them again, what would make you feel safe at work? What else can we do to protect you? Inform and educate your staff. So there's no point having a risk assessment in place if it's just locked away in a filing cabinet or saved on your intranet. You need to share it with staff so they know what the expectations are. They feel that they've been fully advised, fully informed, and they know exactly what they need to do, and also what the obligations of the business are as well. So once you've got your risk assessment and you've put those measures in place, we need to continue to monitor them. And that includes, keeping an eye on our PPE. If we are asking people to wear face masks or gloves or visors, whatever it might be, we need to make sure that we've got plenty of stocks in place, and also make sure that people know how to wear it properly, how they can dispose of them, where they need to be wearing the PPE, so everybody's clear on what they're doing. Lateral flow tests. This is quite an interesting one because employers can actually now order lateral flow tests off the gov.uk website and start to offer tests to their staff twice a week. And this is similar to what they're doing in high schools at the moment. If you go onto the gov.uk website and look at lateral flow tests, you can actually place an order there, but I think it has to be done by the 31st of March if you want to be registered for that. So that's probably worth looking into today now, if that's something that you want to introduce. There's been an increase in washing facilities and products and cleaning standards. We go out now to the supermarket and there's hand sanitizer everywhere, and I would probably expect that to be the same in every workplace. Have them near the doors, high volume areas where perhaps people are, going back and through doorways or touching particular things. Make sure you've got plenty of hand sanitizer or provide gloves. And again, just make sure that staff know what the standards are. So if they're expected to wipe down their workstation at the end of the day, make sure that they're doing that and they've got the proper equipment to be able to do that and they've been properly trained. And communication, again, I know I keep going on about this, but it's just the answer to most things, I think. Open communication. You could set up a forum for your staff made up of different staff members from across the organisation. So people, if they don't feel comfortable talking to their line manager or the SLT, they know that there's a way they can raise any concerns they might have safely and securely. And I'd just say that it's better to encourage that kind of communication than the first time that you hear of a concern or a worry is from the HSE when they drop in to say that they've received a complaint. So really encourage that communication, and even if it's not with yourself as the line manager, make sure they know who they can go to if they want to have a confidential conversation. Okay, so as I said, and we all know, the pandemic isn't over yet. So even when we all come back to work and, most of us have had our vaccinations, it's still not going to be 100% safe. So we need to maintain the measures that we've got in place in terms of social distancing. So, we need to look at workstations. If you've been closed down for so long and you're just opening up the building, look at workstations. Are they too close together? Is someone sat next to a walkway where they're perhaps going to be exposed to lots of people passing by? Can we put up screens to protect people? There's lots of different things that you can take into account. You might need to move people into different offices just to thin out the numbers in the room, but just start to think about that and make your plans in plenty of time before people come back. We also need to look at communal areas. So if we have dining rooms or coffee break rooms, we're going to probably have to restrict the number of people who can comfortably be in there. So look at what signage you can put in place. Do we need to put markings on the floor so people know where they can stand if they're the next person waiting for the coffee machine? They need to stand on that spot before moving forward. So again, be creative, but just make sure that you are communicating with people what the rules are in any particular area of the business. Looking at meetings, I can't wait till we can start having face-to-face meetings. I think Zoom and all of these virtual meeting options that we've got are great, and they've really served a purpose. But for me, having that face-to-face interaction, it just can't be beaten. However, even when everyone's returned to the workplace, it may not be possible to have everybody, all those people you want in a meeting, to be sat in the same room. So it could be that you have a number of people in one room spaced out, and a few other people who have to dial in remotely. But I think we just need to be cautious that we're not all rushing back to the way things used to be, because it's just not the case right now. Okay. We need to also think about, how do we manage our visitors? And this will depend on your workplace. How many visitors do you have? What's their purpose for the visit? If you're accepting deliveries of goods, how do we manage that? And it's putting a policy and process into place. One of our clients has actually got a rule that visitors aren't allowed on site unless they've been pre-booked in. So if it's your delivery guy, the supplier will actually contact you, let them know that the person is coming, and then they're asked to fill in a questionnaire, just about how they're feeling, have they had symptoms, that they will adhere to the rules on site, such as wearing a face mask and hand sanitizing. So you might want to think about putting some kind of procedure in place. You can even talk to your suppliers or people who regularly visit your site. What are they doing? Are there people wearing PPE? How can we work together to make it work and make it safe for everybody? If you have members of staff who commute a lot as part of their work, what are we doing for them? Have we got PPE that they can use if they need to stop off somewhere? If they got the hand sanitizer, face masks, do we need to check in with places where they might stop to see what their rules are, if there are any expectations that we need to follow? Same with people out on the road, just making sure that they've got everything they need to make them feel safe. And we might have people who work on other sites. So if you're a construction company, you may well have people working on building sites. And again, it's about forward thinking and making sure that our staff know what our expectations are and what our measures are, but also out on site, what other measures might they need to follow, and just making sure that everyone's clear on what the expectations are. Okay, so if we sort of move on to non-COVID specific issues that most of us have to deal with from time to time when you're a line manager or a people manager. And I suppose my first point to make about these is, don't delay them. Whatever point you are at in the pandemic, whether you have people on furlough, if they're working from home, if they're on site, it would be easy to use this as an excuse to say, oh, we'll just wait until everybody's back at work and then we'll deal with it. It's not the best thing to do. You'll be mulling over it, they'll be mulling over it, and you're perfectly entitled to still deal with these issues. They're still employees at the end of the day, and I think if there's something that you need to speak to them about, it's just better to do it and get it out in the open. So if you have the scenario where an investigation needs to be carried out, maybe you've had a complaint or an allegation made against a member of staff, get the ball rolling. You need to really start on an investigation as soon as you can while memories are still fresh. If you try and bring something up 2 months down the line, nobody will remember what happened. It won't seem like a big deal anymore. So why are you bothering? So it's really important to sort of get the investigation started, and you can absolutely do that. You can contact people who are on furlough and ask them to participate in an investigation meeting. That's not classed as work, so they can do that. Same with disciplinaries. If you've carried out an investigation, even if it was some time ago now, it's time to really, deal with the issue and move on. Again, it's something that you're probably worrying about, the individual's probably worrying about. So just work through the process. And again, you're entitled to ask the individual to come into work and to go through a disciplinary hearing, as long as you follow all the usual correct procedure, and allow them to ask someone to accompany them and, provide them with all the information that you've got. But absolutely, you can carry on with that. Same with grievances. If someone's put in a grievance, even if it was some time ago now or more recently, I would be going back to that individual to say, look, we've got your grievance. It's there, it's playing on my mind. How would you like us to deal with it? Would you like us to deal with it now and start looking into it, or would you be happy for us to leave it until you come back to work, and sort of put the ball back in their court a bit, and you know, get them to decide. I would think it's in everyone's best interests if someone does have a complaint or a grievance, that it's dealt with sooner rather than later. If you have people who are due to end their probation, they might be on furlough, and you're not quite sure what to do, I would definitely recommend extending it, because they've not had a fair chance to show you, you know, what they can do, and what they're capable of. And so I would be saying to them, look, you know, we feel that, you know, you haven't had a fair chance, and we've not had the proper chance to fully observe you in the workplace. So what we'd like to do is actually extend your probationary period, and then once you come back to work, we can really, you know, sort of monitor what's going on and have a discussion about where you're up to, and also taking into account that you've had some time off, so we might need to put some extra support in place for you. But again, don't just let the probationary period just pass by with no acknowledgement, and then try to pick it up later on, because it's too late. You've missed your chance then. Okay, and you know, in terms of ending contracts, if you've got a contract that's due to come to an end, perhaps a fixed term contract, don't delay it, don't ignore it, because it will just create extra work for you when we get back to work. And also things such as training and apprenticeships, if they're due to come to an end, you know, extend them if you feel that would be fair. But equally, if it serves you to end the contract, as long as you follow, you know, the notice periods, then don't put off doing that until you come back to work. Okay, so just to continue with the non-COVID issues, if you look at training, there's two ways we can look at this. One is that you may well have had training plans in place for the last 12 months that just didn't happen, for obvious reasons. You may want to start looking at revisiting that to see if it's something you want to or can reintroduce quite soon when people come back to work. Or it could be that, you know, with the finances as they are, and you just need to give the business a bit of time to recover, that you want to put that on hold, and that's absolutely fine. But again, communicate with people. You know, if they're expecting to complete a qualification or a training course this year and it's just not feasible for you to do that, then let them know, while reassuring them that as soon as the business is in a place to be able to do that, then they can definitely go back on that course. Same with recruitment, sort of two-pronged, where you may be thinking we need to put a hold on all recruitment. You know, in fact, we're probably going to be looking at reducing headcount, never mind increasing it. So we're going to freeze all vacancies that we currently have. Or it could be that you need to recruit extra numbers. You know, if you've had a successful period during the pandemic, or you've, you know, diversified into other areas and you need to get people to work in those particular departments, then it could be all guns blazing for recruitment. So you need to sort of look at how you do that. I could go on to talking about how to do a good recruitment process, but that's a whole other webinar for another time. Okay, and then flexible working. It could be that because people have been working from home, perhaps they've been on flexible furlough, so they've been working part-time. There may have been other ways that you've managed the workforce, that you might start to get more flexible working requests. And that's okay. You know, you need to look at how it's worked over the last few months. And for those people where it's worked pretty well, and for those roles where it's worked pretty well, it may be something that you're willing to accommodate. Maybe not necessarily on a full-time basis, but maybe allowing people to work in the office 3 days a week and work from home 2 days a week. You may be willing to reduce someone's working hours if they've managed to do their job pretty well. On flexible furlough, you know, you may be happy to let them reduce their hours. So it's a case of, if people come to you with suggestions on how they might want to work in the future, just take some time to consider it. It's not an absolute right to agree to any requests. Your obligation is only to consider them. So what we would advise is that if you can't agree to it straight away, make sure that you follow the flexible working process, in terms of meeting with the employee and discussing all the options, maybe looking at some compromises that can be made. If that's something that you need any help with, then we or any other HR consultant can help you with that. Okay, and again, another free guide. So this time it's our People Manager's Guide to Flexible Working. Again, it's been written by our friends in Guardian Law, and it's just got lots of practical advice and information in there on how to manage a flexible working request. And again, we will put the link in the Facebook group so you can have access to that if you want to. Okay, so that's it from me with performing and managing. But in the next session, Nikki, so you won't have to look at my face anymore. Nikki Eleanor, our founder, will be looking at making changes that affect your workforce. So this is where you've identified that, changes do need to occur and they can be quite thorny and tricky and you're just not quite sure where to start. And then also, unfortunately, we're looking at the end of employment, ending those relationships and perhaps bad practices that have been happening in your business. Again, more legal based, making sure that we're following the right processes and procedures and doing things fairly and with respect for your people. But Nikki will go into much more detail about that when she does session 3. And here's my happy picture again. Just a reminder about the competition that we've got running on Facebook with the Back to the Future of Work group. Please engage with us, talk to us, ask us your questions. We are going to be available on there. So anytime you've got a question, pop it on there and we will come back to you. And the more you engage and get involved, we'll be watching. And if we feel there's one person in particular who's really got involved, then we will be giving you the chance to win a workable plan. And lastly, as I said, any questions, please pop onto the Facebook group. We will be there. Ask us anything within reason, as I said in session 1, and we'll be more than happy to have those conversations with you. And also, just to remind you that the headings of these sessions are based on a musical theme. And we're just, for a bit of fun, asking you to let us know if you've been able to identify the names of the artists. So hopefully we'll see you on the Facebook group page, and thank you for listening, and you'll get to see Nikki in session 3. Thanks, take care.